I just was curious. I'm not familiar with this article about the evolution of reasoning, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what their argument and evidence is that reasoning evolved for argumentation.
See, this is the advantage of having an iPad in front of you. I'm looking at the article. I can read it to you if you want. No. I think what they're trying to do is convince a lot of social scientists and philosophers that reasoning is not as innocent and objective as you would think it is. So what they are making is an argument themselves. They are assembling data from a lot of psychological experiments which show that humans have all these systematic biases and seemingly errors when it comes to reasoning. That has been studied a lot in recent decades. There's just so much information about our flawed ability to reason, our seemingly flawed ability to reason. And what they're doing is not add new data, but cast this in a new light. Say that this all starts to make sense if we do not assume that reasoning is a process for deriving at the truth. Only if you have this expectation, you start to think that humans are flawed. But if you predict that reasoning evolved in order to prepare yourself cognitively for manipulating the other in such a way as to win an argument, it all makes sense. Then, for instance, you would expect self-deception in reasoning to evolve, so that you can more easily convey that you yourself believe in an obviously flawed argument. I think we are very familiar with such examples when we watch our politicians, for instance.
But I guess since it's an evolutionary argument, do they have a notion of at what point this would have evolved? Do they have any evidence of people behaving in this? And I'm just trying to figure out at what point in human evolution they think this took place.
This is, at the moment, a completely unanswerable question. Obviously, it must have evolved after rather sophisticated language had evolved, because without sophisticated language, you can hardly argue. Nobody really knows when language evolved. There are upper and lower time limits. It obviously presupposes a certain, brain capacity, and obviously presupposes ecological problems which probably were not available at the diversion of chimpanzees and humans around 6 to 7 million years ago. But beyond that, it's anyone's guess.
So they're arguing back from certain data that they have now and assuming that this evolved at a certain point, but they're not, for example, gathering evidence about how people behave in pre-modern societies or how they argue or anything of that sort.
I don't think so, no.
Okay. One other quick question. I'm sorry. It's a very interesting idea. What kinds of fallacies in logic are they talking about, for example, fallacies in reasoning or the informal fallacies? What are the what specific kinds of flaws in reasoning are they discussing?
Mostly the one thing they go on most about is the confirmation bias. That people always seek out that information which confirms their viewpoint, which is a very strong and stable pattern in psychological studies, and which is, something all of you will have tried to address in introductory lectures on scientific methodology, right? To try to be critical, try to gather evidence which contradicts your hypothesis, because it's just so hard to get out of people's brains.
Could I say something to Gail? This idea of reasoning and argument, although it's in a whole different context in this article, I was very happy to see that article because these models I was talking about are very close to that. When you work out the proofs in these kinds of logics, which I haven't talked about, instead of being the linear proofs that you learn in logic class, what you have is this dialectical kind of attack relation, so that you give a reason, then somebody else gives a reason against that, and then you give a reason, and it's back and forth, and then if somebody wins, so if I say, well, you know, the bird flies, or Tweety flies because he's a bird, and you say, well, there's a reason, but he's a penguin, and then it wins, and there's nothing else, but sometimes it just goes back and forth, and sometimes, so.
I guess one other quick comment, which is that this, I mean, I took Introduction to Logic really a long time ago, so I don't remember. What I mostly remember was the informal fallacies, actually, and the ways in which people are able to be persuasive that don't, in fact, constitute proof. And I'm just wondering if, it sounds as if those actually, by this argument, would have an evolutionary, an argument that it evolved, you know, to be effective in persuading people, because they are persuasive even though they are not logical proofs.
Okay, so that's a question for that side of the table. I'm concerned with good reasoning here. The bad reasoning is...
Actually, that's a question I want to ask you, Jeff. I would like you to clarify, what is your relationship to cognitive science? Like, to what extent does it matter to your theory how people actually work, how reasoning actually is implemented in the brain? I mean, that's a bit similar to the question, is this descriptive or is this normative?
It's normative. I mean, I'm always delighted.
You're taking the easy way out.
I do. Well, I think it's correct. I'm always delighted to see experiments that people, you know, that say that subjects reach the conclusions I think they should reach. That always delights me and sometimes surprises me, because I have to be trained to see that these are the right conclusions. I think just like regular mathematical logic, it's a normative discipline, and it doesn't surprise me when people don't conform to it. I mean, if the
But the examples you were giving in the beginning, they seem to be taken from real life.
Yes.
Like and
my life.
And would it not be necessary to have an idea what kinds of reasons people are usually convinced by in order to answer your question?
Yeah, okay, so this whole descriptive normative thing, I don't have any special insight to it. You know, you could say it's a normative discipline, but if it had no overlap with what actually happens, then it would be just free-floating nothingness. So it has to have some sort of systematic overlap with the way people behave, but nothing all that precise. I mean, it's nice when people, for me, when people can do what I think they're supposed to do. But it doesn't surprise me when they don't, and that doesn't alarm me.